Welcome back. My name is Nancy Sifford Alana, and I am an author. I'm the author of the book, The Lost Treasure of Lincoln County. So far, we have read through Chapter 9. And in Chapter 9, the two main characters, Jonas and Dale, are out looking for a treasure. They have found a picture of someone that they think buried a treasure. They found a map that they believe is going to lead them to a treasure. And they've got a gentleman helping them. His name is Mr. Harry Sifford. He's a very kind man. He's excited that perhaps they're going to find a treasure. So, Chapter 10 is pretty exciting. So, I hope you are ready for all of this. Let's get started on Chapter 10. Discovery in the Stable. Mr. Sifford gave each of the boys a small hand shovel and kept one for himself. They did not know for sure what they were digging for, so Mr. Sifford cautioned the boys to be careful and not dig too deeply at one time. That was hard for the boys because they were excited. He also told the boys that if they came across anything unusual to say so and not continue until he checked it out. Mr. Sifford and the boys began digging. It didn't take long for a small hill of dirt to form where they pitched the dirt to the side. It was getting hot, as most days are in North Carolina, during the month of June. Luckily, they still had some shade in the big tree, from the big tree to work under, but that would not last long. After about an hour, they were ready for a break. Mr. Sifford opened the thermos of cold water, took a couple of sips, and passed it over to Jonas and Dale. They were thankful for an opportunity to rest and cool off. "Let's get back to work, boys," Mr. Sifford said. "We've got work to do." The boys sprang back into action, ready to dig some more. Jonas couldn't help but do some daydreaming while he was digging. He tried to picture John Sifford walking in that area and thinking about a good place to bury something valuable. Jonas wondered why he wanted to bury something of value. There must have been a really good reason, but what could it be? Dale started humming the tune to a song, Tom Dooley. It was a popular song by the Kingston Trio he had heard on the radio at home. Then he started singing, "Hang down your head, Tom Dooley. Hang down your head and cry. Hang down your head, Tom Dooley. Poor boy, you're bound to die." Jonas joined in and the boys started digging in time with the music. These were the only words they could remember, so they sang them over and over. Mr. Sifford smiled and even joined in with them after the third time through. Dale pushed his shovel in the ground and hit something hard. At first, he thought it was a rock. This area has plenty of them, but then when he looked, he realized it wasn't a rock. Dale pushed his shovel deep into the ground and then he said, "Hey guys, I think I've hit something besides a rock." Jonas and Mr. Sifford stopped digging and turned around to see what Dale was talking about. Mr. Sifford took his hand shovel and gently moved some more dirt out. All he could see was something reddish-brown that looked like metal. Maybe it was an old tin can. Mr. Sifford continued to dig, and the object continued to show. Mr. Sifford was right. It was just an old tin can. About that time, Dale noticed a cloud move across the sun. It was a large gray cloud. It felt good to the dirty diggers who were getting hot again, and it actually cooled the air down. Mr. Sifford looked up. "Boys, that looks like a rain cloud. If it starts raining, we're going to have to move away from this tree. It would just be our luck that this old tree would get struck by lightning with us standing under it." Mr. Sifford stood up and looked around the field to see if there was a structure that they could run to quickly if it started raining. Less than a quarter of a mile out in the field, they saw a solitary structure that looked like an old horse stable. "You boys see that stable over there? If it starts raining, we're going to run over there for shelter. Just leave the tools, they'll be all right." Mr. Sifford and the boys got back down on their knees and started digging again. The more they dug, the more metal they uncovered. Disappointed, they had to admit that it probably had been somebody's trash pile. After several more minutes, Jonas felt the first drop of rain, then the second. They dropped their shovels and started walking quickly to the horse stable. Then the sky opened up and rain poured down. All three treasure hunters took off running. The stable wasn't very sturdy. It had obviously been there a long time. It was dirty, dark, and full of cobwebs. Dale was not happy at all to be in there. He stayed close to Jonas and kept his eyes wide open. "It's raining cats and dogs out there," said Mr. Sifford. "I hope this lets up soon." "You and me both," Dale said quickly. "This is creepy." The wind began to blow, and the cracks between the boards made the wind whistle with each gust. Dale's eyes opened even wider. He moved closer to Jonas and grabbed his arm right above the elbow. "Dale, let go of me," said Jonas with frustration in his voice. He gave Dale a push with his elbow, which caused Dale to step back. When he stepped back, his foot caught on something that made him trip and fall to the ground. "Jonas, what'd you do that for?" Dale asked while sitting on the dirty floor of the stable. And then Dale saw what he had tripped over. "Hey guys, look!" On the floor of the stable were circles made of wood. Dale had tripped over one of them, and the two other circles were in the corners of the stable. They looked like a tree trunk had been cut to form circles. You would have been able to count the rings in the wood to tell the age of the tree if it hadn't been so dark in there. Each circle was about 8 inches tall and partially buried under the dirt. There on the floor of the stable were 3 circles in the form of a triangle. "What on earth are those?" Mr. Sifford asked. "Why would there be wooden stumps on the floor of a horse stable? Strange. You don't suppose..." Dale's words trailed off to his thoughts. "You don't suppose these are the 3 circles we're looking for, do you?" "They certainly could be," said Mr. Sifford. "There are 3 circles in the form of a triangle. I left my shovel under the tree. As soon as it stops raining so hard, I'll go after it and we can start digging in here." The rain ended as quickly as it started. Mr. Sifford walked back to the tree and picked up the small shovels. Once he was back inside the stable, the sun was shining and Dale was noticeably relieved. "Okay, boys, let's try this again," Mr. Sifford said with an energizing voice. He knew the boys had probably worked harder that day than they had ever worked, and they were getting tired. It was dry inside the stable, but that was the only good thing about it. Dale wished that they would hurry up and find the treasure so he could get out of there. After a few minutes of digging, Mr. Sifford noticed something strange for a stable. There was a wooden door on the floor of the stable that had been covered with dirt. They cleared off the dirt the best they could and noticed there were rusty hinges on the door. Mr. Sifford stood up so he could get a firm grip on the door and pulled up. Dust and dirt flew everywhere. When the dust settled, they could see a rather large hole that had been carefully dug out many years ago. And sitting inside the hole was... What do you think? Gosh, that's the end of chapter 10. What do you think was sitting inside that hole? Well, I don't know about you, but I think we should keep on reading. Let's get into chapter 11 and see what was in the hole. It was a large wooden chest. "Yee-haw!" shouted all 3 treasure hunters at the same time. They stood up and did a happy dance around the stable. All right, boys, Mr. Sifford said. This could be something very exciting or it could be very disappointing. There may not be anything of value in this chest. Don't get your hopes up. The three of them got on their knees, leaned over the hole, and tried to pick up the chest, but it was too heavy. And with some teamwork, they were able to lift it out of the hole and place it in an area of the stable that had the most sunlight. With great care, they opened the lid of the chest. Now we're going to stop here just a minute because I want to show you what they found. This is the big chest that they found. You see this big chest? This big wooden chest. This is what was in the hole, and it's heavy. So they found this in the hole, and then they're getting ready to open it up. So what do you think they found inside this treasure chest? You want to know? Well, it looks pretty interesting. So I'm going to set this chest back over here, and let's see what we can pull out of this chest. Oh my goodness, that's heavy. Okay. The first thing Mr. Sifford saw was a velvet cloth, of course. It was similar to, but much larger than the one that was in the small box. Now you remember that one. It was just the one in the small box was just about this size. Well, the one inside the treasure chest was larger. Same material. The velvet looked as if it had been used to cover windows or a bed or something large. It was in fairly good shape considering where it had been for who knows how long. The heavy cloth had done a good job of protecting the contents of the chest. They treated each item very carefully. Mr. Sifford told them to treat the items with respect because John Sifford had hidden the items for a reason. Jonas reached in, and Jonas picked up a book. Okay. He held it over in the sunlight, and now here's the book. It was an old book. And he took it over in the sunlight, and he could tell that it was not written in English. So if we open it up, if I can get this close enough, you can tell that it's not written in English. Okay? Mr. Sifford said it was written in German. Jonas laid it down carefully on the velvet cloth that had been spread out on top of the lid of the chest. Dale reached in the chest and pulled out a pouch that closed with a drawstring. So here's the pouch. You see the drawstring on it. You pull it tight and it closes it. You push it, pull it open from the top, and then it opens up. And he opened it up, and out fell. Empty them in my hand, then I can show you the coins, the gold coins. We found gold, Dale shouted. Look at these coins, they're beautiful, said Jonas with excitement. Although he had hoped to find gold, he knew it was highly unlikely that he would. Wow, was all Mr. Sifford could say for several long seconds. Those are beautiful. Dale put the coins back into the pouch without counting them. He knew there were more inside the pouch, and they could count them whenever they had more sunlight. Mr. Sifford waited patiently and watched as each boy selected an item to take out of the box. Jonas and Dale had been the ones to find the small wooden box by the creek that began their adventure, and he wanted them to be the ones to take the items out of the chest. Next, Jonas pulled out something. Wrapped in another piece of velvet cloth, he uncovered a flag. It was a homemade American flag. The colors had faded some, and there were a few small holes in it. Jonas could tell it was smaller than the flag in the triangle case in his home. Mr. Sifford held up the flag for the boys to see, and then he gently folded it back up and laid it in the velvet cloth with the other items. And I am afraid to pick it up because it is so delicate. The material in it is so thin that it's almost paper thin. And so I have chosen not to pick it up, but it's an American flag, and we'll learn more about that. Dale selected the next item. It was a large glass jar. Dale put his hand on the metal lid and tried to open it. Let me show you what it looks like. It's this big glass jar, but it has a metal lid. And this is called a wide mouth lid that's on this jar. So Dale's hand couldn't quite reach it and open it up. Remember, it had been buried for a long time. So he handed it to Mr. Sifford. Mr. Sifford was able to open it up and see what was inside. And there were all kinds of old papers. In fact, this paper even looks kind of like one that the map was drawn on. But there were several things in here. There were deeds. Well, let me read and we'll see what it says were in here. The jar had a wide mouth on it and Dale couldn't reach across it. He gave it to Mr. Sifford to open. Inside they found several old documents and pieces of paper. There were too many to stop and look at individually, but they could tell most of them were receipts from purchases made at a general store for food and supplies. Later, they could look at them more closely. There was one last item in the chest. Mr. Sifford leaned over and pulled it out. It was another book. Let's see what it looked like. It looked like this. Another book. Okay, I gotta find my place again. Its pages had turned yellow with age and were very fragile. It appeared to be a diary written by Joachim Sifford, who was John Sifford's grandfather. So this is an old leather book. This would be tied around it to keep it closed. And inside the pages were old and yellow. It's got Joachim Sifford's name on it. And then all of these old pages were written on. And I don't know how well you can see all this, but it's very faint and just very hard to read. But it was a very old book, so let's find out what it was. All right, well, it was a diary, and it said at the front that it belonged to Joachim Sifford. So, I wonder what's written in the diary. Well, boys, that looks like it's it, Mr. Sifford said. We have hit the jackpot as far as I'm concerned. Let's load this stuff back in the chest and get it home. The boys helped Mr. Sifford gather all the items and place them back in the box. With great care, they carried the chest to the tree where they had left the tool bag. Mr. Sifford took out some heavy cord and wrapped it around the chest several times. He did not want to take a chance that the chest would come apart. When it was secure, Jonas and Dale each took one end of the chest to carry, and Mr. Sifford picked up the tool bag. After a long and careful walk back to Mr. Sifford's car, they loaded the treasure chest and the tools into the trunk. They were all tired, dirty, and hungry. They decided to go home, get some rest, and start the next day looking for more items. Wow, chapters 10 and 11 were pretty exciting. They did find the treasure chest. And now we are going to stop. The next chapter, we are going to find out more about those treasures. The gold. What do you think? Do you think maybe the gold was real gold? Was there even gold in that area? How could they have gold at that time in North Carolina. I think chapter 12 is going to answer some of those questions for us. So I hope that you will come back for the next part where we will read chapter 12, The Treasures Within, the Lost Treasure of Lincoln County. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you'll come back for the next part.